Will Smith wasn't just famous, he was everywhere. The music, the movies, the charm, the smile. A cultural sensation who didn't just knock on Hollywood's door, he kicked it down and rewrote the rules. Fresh Prince wasn't a sitcom, it was a movement. Bad Boys wasn't just a movie, it was a launchpad. Independence Day, Men in Black, those weren't just blockbusters. They were moments we all grew up with. Moments that turned a kid from West Philly into one of the most bankable stars on earth. He was lightning in human form, energy, swagger, talent, timing. A superstar who could rap, act, joke, charm, and still make you feel like he was your friend from around the way. Will Smith didn't rise, he blasted off, and the whole world watched the fireworks. But fireworks don't burn forever. Before the scandals, before the memes, before one night shook the world and forced us to question everything we thought we knew about him, there was a man we idolized. A flawless hero, or at least that's how it looked. We adopted his smile as proof of happiness. We assumed success meant peace. We believed in the legend without ever asking about the man. Because behind the iconic films, behind the golden boy persona, behind the laughter and the loud applause, there were cracks. Pressure, image, identity, ego, the weight of perfection building for decades. One spectacular rise, one devastating fall. And now, one question remains. How will he be remembered? The rise, the fall, the question. Willard Carroll Smith II was born on the 25th of September 1968 in Philadelphia to Caroline Bright, a school board administrator, a smart woman who put education over everything. Willard Carroll Smith Sr. was Will's father, a US Air Force veteran and refrigeration engineer. Due to his time in the Air Force, Will Smith's father developed a strict routine and lifestyle that he instilled into his family. Will was the second of 4 kids. He has an older sister, Pam, and 2 younger twin siblings, Harry and Ellen Smith. He grew up in... On the playground is where he spent most of his days. He was charismatic and already larger than life. But home wasn't always a happy place. In his memoir, Will recalls, "I've always thought of myself as a coward. Most of my memories of my childhood involve me being afraid in some way. Afraid of other kids, afraid of being hurt or embarrassed, afraid of being seen as weak, but mostly I was afraid of my father. When I was 9 years old, I watched my father punch my mother inside her head so hard that she collapsed. I saw her spit blood. That moment in that bedroom, probably more than any other moment in my life, has defined who I am today." Will says that over time he found himself constantly apologizing to his mom for not being able to protect her that day, for being a coward, as he says. Will's father was Will's hero, but according to Will, in the streets of West Philly, you had to be tough, leading to his dad being the way he was. His father was smoking by the age of 11 and drinking by the age of 14, leading him to develop an aggressive and violent behavior. All these things formed emotional scars in Will from early that would later affect his adult life. The constant fear in his childhood honed his sensitivity to every detail in his environment. From a very young age, he developed a razor-sharp intuition and ability to tune to every emotion around him. It served him well as an actor and a performer, but in real life, that would basically make him a people pleaser, someone who adopts to everyone else's ways of doing or emotions. In a family of fighters, Will described himself as the weak one, saying, "How we decide to respond to our fears is the person we become. I decided to respond to my fears by being funny. That night, in the bathroom at only 9 years old, watching the destruction of my family as my mother collapsed to the floor, I made a silent promise to my mother, to myself, and to my family, that one day I would be in charge and that this would never, ever happen again." He attended Our Lady of Lourdes, a private Catholic elementary school in Philadelphia, and also Overbrook High School. His parents separated when he was 13 and divorced around the year 2000. Will began rapping at the age of 12. When his grandmother found a notebook of his lyrics, which he described as containing all his little curse words, she wrote him a note on the page in the book that said, "Dear Willard, truly intelligent people do not have to use words like these to express themselves. Please show the world that you are smart as we think you are." Will said that this influenced his decision to not use any profanity in his music, now or later on. In 1985, hip-hop was on the rise thanks to East Coast acts such as Run DMC, LL Cool J, and Grandmaster Flash. The genre was taking over the whole country, including Philadelphia, leading Will to further immerse himself in the hip-hop scene. In 1985, a local DJ was performing at a house party just a few blocks down Will Smith's residence. That DJ was a man called Jeffrey Towns, who went by the stage name DJ Jazzy Jeff. The two were introduced to each other at the party. In those days, DJs had a hype man that would basically get on the mic and spit a few bars while also hyping them up as they played their set. Think LL Cool J with DJ Cut Creator. In those days, the DJ was just as important as the rapper, if not more important. Anyway, Jazzy Jeff's hype man was running late to the party, so Will decided to fill in, and as they said back in the day, they rocked the house. The chemistry was undeniable, and the two officially became acquainted. Shortly after, the two decided to work on several demos and would end up creating their first song together, Girls Ain't Nothing But Trouble, a song that chronicles funny misadventures in Will's life involving girls. The song became a hit while Will was still in high school, so you can imagine he was probably on top of the world back then. He became known for light-hearted storytelling raps, which were also profanity-free, thus showing that Will kept his promise to his grandmother to refrain from using curse words on records. Based on this success, the duo were brought to the attention of Jive Records and Russell Simmons. The duo signed with Jive and released their first album, Rock the House, in March of 1987. That same year, the duo quickly got to work on their follow-up album, which would become their most successful album to date. He's the DJ, I'm the rapper. The album would release in 1988, anchored by the single Brand New Funk and its second single, Parents Just Don't Understand, which won the first ever Grammy Award for Best Rap Performance at the Grammy Awards in 1989 and reached number 12 on the US Billboard Hot 100. They literally made history at 20 years old, the first rappers to ever win a Grammy. However, due to the Grammys being ignorant about hip-hop at the time, they didn't think that the rap category was important enough to be televised. So Will and Jeff were told that there wasn't enough time to televise all the categories. They televised 16 categories, but hip-hop wasn't one of them. Make it make sense. The duo had a lot to say about this, confident that hip-hop was so big it should have been given equal representation on the big screen, especially with such a history-making moment for the genre.
Chose to boycott. We feel that it's a slap in the face. We don't have a problem with the Grammy as an award or the Grammy as an institution. We just had a problem with the 1989 design of the award show. We feel that our music was important enough and is important enough.
I think it was just lack of knowledge.
Yeah, ignorance on the part of Naris. They don't know anything about rap music, and our boycott was to open their eyes to rap music, so next year some rap group will be able to perform on the Grammys and the award will be televised because the music is large enough and important enough to be on that show.
They were still asked to appear during the ceremony anyways, but they refused, sending a strong message. Hip-hop is to be respected. Institutions like the Grammys shouldn't be allowed to benefit from the appearance of inclusivity without actual inclusive treatment. Their boycott made an impact, and the following year the Grammys began to televise the presentation of the award for the hip-hop category. This was huge, man. In a way, we owe it to Will and DJ Jazzy Jeff for all the rappers that got their Grammy wins televised after that. For the first time in his life, Will started seeing real money, and just as any young boy from the hood, he wouldn't make good use of all that money. Will spent money freely around 1988 and 1989 on several cars, clothes, apartments, etc. And in all of that, he underpaid his income taxes. The Internal Revenue Service, meaning the IRS, eventually assessed a $2.8 million tax debt against Will, took many of his possessions, and garnished his income. About that period in his life, Will recalls, "I was rich and famous, minus the rich and minus the famous. I was worse than broke. I was in the hole. The walls were tumbling down. I had enjoyed Sodom and Gomorrah way more than I was enjoying Jericho." And if you thought that period in Will's life was dark, it was only about to get darker. You see, in 1989, West Philly was run by a gang known as the Junior Black Mafia, or JBM for short. And Will explained that it was a case where either you were with them or you were against them. And with Will becoming a prominent figure at the time, all eyes were on him. So Will decided to start hanging out with Leroy Bucky Davis, who was a prominent member of the gang. In his memoir, Will says, "As a 20-year-old millionaire rapper, the only people who can afford to hang with you are other rappers, professional athletes, and drug dealers. I chose the drug dealers." To keep him out of harm's way in public, Will hired a bodyguard called Charlie Mack, and one day, Will was invited to the Philadelphia radio station WDAS-FM, hosted by Mimi Brown, who has supported Will from early on in his career. The studio was a soundproof room with see-through glass on both sides, so when Will was performing, a crowd began to form through the glass. Eventually, Will realized that he was now being watched by Dana Goodman, his first ever record promoter and someone he was by then on bad terms with. Dana was with another record promoter named William Hendrix. This William Hendrix guy opened the door and entered the studio. Hendrix was now standing beside Charlie Mack, who was keeping a close eye on him. When Will finished rapping, William began shouting, "You need to apologize to Dana Goodman." Charlie told Hendrix to calm down and that they were live on radio, so he should stop shouting. Hendrix ignored the advice and shouted even louder, "You need to apologize to Dana Goodman." Charlie began to try and block William's path as he began to move closer to Will, shouting the same sentence. But before he could finish saying the word Goodman, bang! Charlie Mack delivered a hefty right-hand punch to William Hendrix and was knocked out. He fell over and cassettes around the studio scattered all across the room. Worried that the police might arrive at any minute, Charlie and Will fled the scene. William Hendrix was beaten so badly to the extent that he almost went blind in one eye and required 6 stitches. Will Smith was arrested and charged with aggravated assault, criminal conspiracy, and recklessly endangering another person. The most confusing aspect about this case was that Charlie Mack was not arrested, only Will was. Will argued that he was targeted because Hendrix could get more money out of him as opposed to Charlie Mack. So as you can see, this was a dark period. Will went from a Grammy winner to a prisoner in the span of 8 months. Will recalls he had to spend the night in a cell at a West Philadelphia police station with other inmates waking him up all night long asking for his autograph. It was the worst night of his life. He wants to forget it ever happened. When Will finally got out, he was given a warning. A family friend who was a police officer asked Will if he knew a certain group of people from JBM. Will admitted that he knew them. So this officer warned him that the FBI was rapidly closing in on this gang and would be willing to arrest anyone with any association with them whatsoever. So he was told to leave Philadelphia as soon as possible. Will had been flying back and forth to LA at the time, so he decided to move permanently to the West Coast. Then, in an act of desperation, he asked JBM member Bucky for a loan of $10,000, enough money to pursue a career in acting. Because you know, Will was absolutely broke at this point and in trouble with Uncle Sam. However, Bucky would be killed in a gang-related incident shortly after, so Will was never able to get his hands on the money. This is where Will really began to panic because things weren't going as planned in LA, and he was struggling to find work. At this point, his then girlfriend suggested that he could get some acting roles by simply hanging around at the Arsenio Hall show, which was huge at the time. Will's girlfriend suggested that hopefully by hanging around he could bump into someone there and network. Will wasn't in any way confident that this would work, but he did it anyway. And around there, he bumped into a guy named Benny Medina, who was looking to develop a sitcom about his teenage life where he was sent to live with a rich family in Beverly Hills. If that sounds familiar, that is the premise of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which coincidentally also has a similar premise to Will's life at that point, with him having to escape West Philadelphia to the West Coast to get away from trouble. To secure the role in the sitcom, Will was invited to a party at the home of the legendary music producer Quincy Jones, who was looking to produce the show. At the party, Will was surrounded by household names like Steven Spielberg and Stevie Wonder. Benny Medina asked Will to audition right there on the spot in front of everybody. Will did the audition to a standing ovation, and that's when the birth of a new chapter in Will's life officially began. In September of 1990, the first episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air made its television debut on NBC. Will performed the show's theme song, which was also produced by Quincy Jones. The show was a smash hit, and it instantly put Will Smith on the map as a skilled and charismatic actor. Upon experiencing new success in the acting space, Will had a new goal he desperately wanted to pursue. He made up his mind that he would become the biggest movie star in the world. Following the success of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Will got back in the studio with DJ Jazzy Jeff, who was also a recurring character on the show. Together they worked on their fourth album, and on the 23rd of July 1991, the duo released their comeback album titled Home Base, which spawned their most successful single to date, a single us millennials are all familiar with, and I'm sure even Gen Z has heard of the song at least once, Summertime. The song was a hit and it landed them their second Grammy. The song honestly captures the summertime vibe so well. I don't know what it is, but it's one of my favourite songs by Will. With Will's finances back on track, he decided to try his luck at love. In 1992, Will would marry Cherie Zampino, and in November of that year, she would give birth to their first child, Trey Smith. With Will now trying to continue to grow his acting career, he would make his first major role debut in 1993 in a dramatic film called 6 Degrees of Separation. Though the film wasn't a major hit at the box office, it solidified Will as a serious actor, putting him on the radar of more producers and directors. That same year, Will and DJ Jazzy Jeff would release their fifth and final album, Code Red, which would go gold and spawn the singles Boom, Shake the Room and I'm Looking for the One, which is another one of my favorites by the duo. In 1995, Will was casted alongside Martin Lawrence to star in the action comedy film titled Bad Boys. The chemistry between the two actors on screen was praised by the audiences, leading the film to be a huge success. With a budget of roughly $20 million, the film would go on to gross $141 million at the box office. The film was a big deal upon release because both Martin and Will were already popular because of their sitcom shows Martin and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air respectively, and both shows were still running at the time, so the filming for Bad Boys had to be done relatively quickly in just 2 months.
Mommy and Daddy won't let me watch Bad Boys.
Bad Boys, huh? What you gonna do?
The movie would turn both Martin and Will into breakout action stars. Another fun fact, did you know that a lot of the dialogue in the film between Will and Martin was improvised because the director, Michael Bay, hated the script for Bad Boys, as it felt it was too generic, so he basically told the two actors to improvise their lines, especially when they bickered with one another, which is why the chemistry felt so natural. As Will Smith's professional life was rising, his personal life was declining, as in that same year, he and his wife of 3 years, Cherie, would divorce. The reason for that divorce is interesting. Let me explain, and let's rewind this for a bit. In the late 1980s, Will saw Jada in an episode of the sitcom A Different World, in which Jada Pinkett starred in. That's when Will developed a little crush for her and decided he just had to meet her. Fast forward a few years, while Will was starring on the earlier seasons of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the opportunity to meet Jada finally came, when he arranged a visit on the set of A Different World through his co-star Alfonso Ribeiro, who plays Carlton. Will ended up getting onto the set the same day Cherie was there, visiting her friend and show writer Orlando Jones, who ironically was supposed to introduce Will to Jada. But Will ended up getting Cherie's number instead, and the two began dating. I'm guessing Will forgot the reason he was there in the first place was to meet Jada. But anyway, eventually, Will and Cherie got married, and you know the rest. Fast forward to 1995 and Will and Jada finally got the chance to meet when she auditioned for the role of Lisa, Will Smith's girlfriend on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. However, she wouldn't get the part as she was deemed too short, so the role instead went to Nia Long. However, Will and Jada hit it off and began dating while Will was still married, something that Jada later expressed as a regret. While Will was out for dinner with Cherie one night, he recalls going into the bathroom and breaking down in tears as he realized his heart was with Jada. However, divorce for Will was not an option as he was strongly against divorce. Cherie though didn't feel the same way. She knew Will was being distant, and whether or not she knew it was because of Jada, she decided to file for divorce from him on Valentine's Day of that year. Through it all, Will continued to pursue his movie star goal and would be getting lead roles in blockbuster films such as Independence Day in 1996 and Men in Black in 1997. In that same year, Will also returned to music, but this time as a solo act, by releasing his album Big Willie Style in November of that year. The album featured the hit single Men in Black, which was also on the soundtrack of the movie. It also featured a heartfelt song dedicated to his son Trey called Just the Two of Us, another banger. It also featured Miami and the breakout hit Getting Jiggy With It, Na 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 Na, banger, which became a crossover hit and reached #1 on the pop charts. The song would go on to get Will his first Grammy as a solo artist. Big Willie Style would go on to be certified 9 times platinum. I know Will was on top of the world at the time, man. He was killing it as an artist and as an actor. And that Big Willie Style album is full of serious bangers, I'm telling you. On New Year's Eve of 1997, Will and Jada would end up getting married. When reflecting on that wedding night, Jada's mum recalls that she, Jada, was very unpleasant because she felt sick due to her 3-month pregnancy with Jaden. She cried a lot and didn't really want to get married. She was forced to marry Will after Jada's mum found out she was pregnant. For Will though, this was like a dream come true, because for one, he's marrying the woman of his dreams, and for two, he was always big on marriage and family.
And I was so upset that I had to have a wedding. I was so pissed. I went crying.
It wasn't a day in my life that I wanted anything other than being married and having a family.
Wow.
From
Well, thank the good Lord.
literally 5 years old, I was picturing what my family would be.
But did you guys see the way Jada was looking at Will? No respect as a father or a husband. And in that same video, she talked about how she never wanted marriage in front of the kids. Very strange, man. But anyway, in 1998, Will starred alongside Gene Hackman in another one of my favorite films, Enemy of the State. The movie was a critical and commercial success, further solidifying him as the golden boy of Hollywood. However, Will would start making some mistakes when choosing films to star in. That same year, he was offered roles in 2 films. The Matrix, where he would star as the protagonist, Neo, or Wild Wild West. As you all know, Will would place his bet on flipping Wild Wild West. I know. The role of Neo would end up going to Keanu Reeves, and the movie would be a big success. On the other hand, Wild Wild West would also do okay at the box office, grossing over $220 million. However, it was critically panned by critics and moviegoers. I mean, everyone hated that movie. Will would later express regret over not choosing to star in The Matrix. In November of 1999, Will released his second solo album, Millennium, another solid body of work with bangers such as I'm Coming, Will 2K, Freaking It, The Butter, and Who Am I? Honestly, between this album and Big Willie Style, I don't even know which one I like more. They're both great. This album was another successful Will as it reached #5 on the pop charts and it went 2 times platinum. Again, doing all of this while maintaining his clean image, not one curse on this album.
All you rappers yelling about who you put in a hearse, do me a favor, write one verse without a curse.
In 2001, Will continued his hot streak in films when he portrayed heavyweight boxer Muhammad Ali in the biopic Ali. For his performance, he was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor and the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor. Unfortunately, he didn't win. In 2002, following a 4-year musical hiatus, Will returned with his third album, Born to Reign. which reached number 13th on the Billboard Hot 100 and was certified gold. Will continued the tradition of making songs based on his films by making the album's first single the theme song for Men in Black 2 called Black Suits Coming, Nod Your Head, which was a banger and it reached number 3 on the UK singles charts. 2003 saw Will and Martin return for Bad Boys 2, the sequel to the 1995 film Bad Boys. The film follows detectives Marcus Burnett and Mike Lowry investigating the flow of ecstasy into Miami. The film was a box office success, grossing over $270 million worldwide. In the following year, he starred in the science fiction film I, Robot and the animated film Shark Tale. Both films were box office successes. Shark Tale is literally part of my childhood and came with a stacked cast. I mean, Will Smith, Robert De Niro, Renee Zellweger, Angelina Jolie, and Jack Black amongst others. After that, Will dropped his album Lost and Found in 2005, which peaked at number 6 on the Billboard 200. This was actually the first album of Will I listened to in its entirety when I was a kid, because a friend let me borrow it for a couple of months. I remember that time vividly. And this album is also full of bangers and in my opinion isn't talked about enough. The lead single, Switch, reached the top 10 on both the Billboard Hot 100 and the UK singles chart. Also the songs Party Starter, Lost and Found, Tell Me Why featuring Mary J. Blige, which is also my favourite of the album, Pump Your Brakes featuring Snoop Dogg and Loretta are just some of the best tracks of the album, but overall it's a really good album. In 2006, Will and his son Jaden played father and son in the 2006 biographical drama The Pursuit of Happiness. It is a popular opinion that Will was snubbed by the Oscars because his performance in this film was crazy. This movie never fails to get me emotional. Jaden was phenomenal in the film as well. In the film, Will portrays Chris Gardner. Will first became interested in making a film about Gardner after seeing him on 2020 and connected with him during production. The film, along with the Smiths' performances, received high praise, but as I mentioned before, they did not win an Oscar for it. In 2007, Will starred in the film I Am Legend, released on December 14, 2007. Alongside positive reviews, its opening was the largest ever for a film released in the US during December. The film was a huge commercial success, grossing more than $500 million at the box office at $585 million. Another stellar performance by Will. Love this film. In the following years, Will would star in several highly successful films, which would further cement him as the largest star of Hollywood, as everything he touched was a guaranteed moneymaker. For most of his career, Will Smith represented control. Control of his image, control of his narrative, control of how the world saw him. He had built a reputation on positivity, discipline, and likability. A man who smiled through the pressure and never let the mask slip. But behind the image, something was shifting. As the years went on, Will became more introspective. He spoke openly about self-improvement, spirituality, healing childhood trauma, and confronting ego. He talked about growth, not just as a star, but as a man. And for the first time, the public was invited into spaces they had never seen before. His marriage to Jada Pinkett, which was once admired as a symbol of stability and black excellence, slowly became the subject of speculation. Rumors that had once lived on gossip blogs began creeping into mainstream conversation. Whispers of separations, of unconventional boundaries, of a relationship that didn't look like the fairy tale people had projected onto them. Then in 2020, the whispers became headlines. Jada publicly acknowledged a past relationship with singer August Alsina, a moment that instantly became known as the entanglement. The internet froze, then it exploded. Clips circulated endlessly, screenshots, memes, commentary, reaction videos. A private chapter of their marriage was now global entertainment. To this day, I can't tell you why Jada decided to talk about that. I don't know why she thought that was a good idea. And while both Will and Jada spoke about the situation with honesty and vulnerability, the response wasn't thoughtful. It was brutal. Jada became the villain in the public imagination. She was accused of manipulation, of embarrassment, of breaking the image that people thought they knew. Will, meanwhile, was cast as the wounded man, pitied by others and mocked by many. For the first time in his life, Will wasn't being admired. He was being analysed, judged, reduced to reaction clips and facial expressions. That now infamous image of him sitting beside Jada, eyes tired, smile strained, became a symbol, not of a scandal, but of discomfort. Of a man forced to process pain in front of the world. The public didn't want context, they wanted sides. And social media chose one. What followed was relentless. Late night jokes, online ridicule, think pieces dissecting his masculinity, his marriage, his strength. Like, it was nuts. It was actually crazy. The same internet that once celebrated Will Smith was now questioning him. His manhood, his choices, his authenticity. For a man who had spent decades being loved by the whole world, this was unfamiliar territory for him. I can only imagine. The smile still appeared, the interviews still happened, but something was different. The charm felt heavier, the laughter was forced, the confidence no longer effortless, the image was cracking. Not because Will had failed, but because the myth of perfection had finally collapsed. The public was finally seeing what had always been there. A complicated marriage, two imperfect people, and a man who carried the weight of expectation for far too long. And when pressure builds quietly over the years, it doesn't release gently, it breaks in moments no one sees coming. By the time Will Smith walked into the Dolby Theatre that night, he was carrying years of pressure, public scrutiny, private pain, and a narrative he no longer controlled. The smile was back in place, the suit was tailored, the cameras were rolling, but beneath the surface, something was already fractured. And on the biggest stages of his life, in front of the world, that fracture was about to show. March 27th, 2022, the Academy Awards, Hollywood's most polished night. A celebration of excellence, legacy, and image. Will Smith arrived as the favourite. Decades of work had led him there. King Richard had earned him his first Oscar, the final seal on a flawless career. He sat in front row, smiling, laughing, playing the part that the world expected. Then came the joke.
Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? That was a nice one. Okay.
A few words from the stage, a reference to Jada Pinkett Smith. Will stood up, walked towards the stage, and slapped Chris Rock, live in front of millions. The room froze. Laughter collapsed into confusion. History rewrote itself in real time. For a moment, nobody quite understood what had just happened or what they had just seen. Not the audience, not the internet, not even Will himself. Back in his seat, the mask returned, but it didn't fit anymore. His voice cracked, his anger spilled out, and the world watched a lifetime of restraint unravel in seconds. The Oscar win, once the headline, now became a footnote. The slap unfortunately overshadowed Will's first Oscar win. The man once known as the safest star in Hollywood was now its most controversial. And later that night, standing on stage, golden statue in hand, Will tried to explain himself. Tears, apologies, justifications. A speech that felt like a man realizing too late that the moment had already escaped him. It wasn't the speech people heard, it was the slap that they remembered. And one night, Will didn't just lose control of the room, he lost control of his legacy. Because when the world stops seeing you as you were, and starts seeing you for only what you did, the fall is immediate and unforgiving. After the noise came the quiet. No red carpets, no punchlines, no effortless charm to hide behind. Just silence. Will Smith issued apologies, publicly and privately. He stepped away. Projects were paused, Invitations stopped coming. Hollywood, an industry built on image, created distance. For the first time in his life, since his rise, Will was forced to sit with himself as a man reckoning with the consequences of one moment. In the months that followed, he spoke less and reflected more about childhood trauma, about the pressures to be perfect, about the danger of suppressing emotion for decades in the name of control. What the world saw as a sudden collapse, to him was just the release of something that had been building quietly for years. And slowly, cautiously, he returned. The confidence remained, but it no longer demanded approval. The interviews were softer, and despite the backlash, something else became clear. The world hadn't turned its back on Will. Millions still loved him, still defended him, still saw the man beyond the mistake, because one moment, no matter how public, couldn't erase a lifetime. A lifetime that includes achievements few people in any era have ever achieved. A black man from West Philadelphia who became one of the most bankable movie stars in history, who dominated music, television, and film, who opened doors that were never really meant to be open, who showed that the global success didn't have to come at the cost of identity. For decades, Will Smith made people laugh, made them feel seen, made them believe, and that matters. So now we arrive at the question. When Will Smith is gone, when the headlines fade, when the memes stop looping, when history begins to simplify, what will remain? Will he be remembered for 6 seconds on an Oscar stage, or for 30 years of cultural impact? Will history define him by his fall, or by the height of his rise? Maybe the truth is more complicated. Maybe Will Smith's legacy isn't about perfection, but about humanity. About what happens when someone carries greatness for too long without being allowed to be flawed. His story doesn't end with a slap, it ends with a conversation about pressure, about forgiveness, about how we judge the lives of those we once idolized. The rise, the fall, the question.